I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Happy 4th of July, Kiki!
Happy 4th of July Tuesday and happy birthday, America!
250 years of the United States of America. Considering the current state of the United States, depending on what you're celebrating.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, right now, we record these things a little early, so by the time we're set to put this up, who knows?
I don't know. I just watched the Obama Center opening, and that was pretty cool. And that's about, and
look how many people wore tan suits. Shout out to all the people who wore tan suits.
And of course, the celebration of the Knicks winning the NBA Finals, and no other celebrations happened recently. None.
Well, I don't know. A lot of the thing that's been making me love America currently is, we got the World Cup going on, and I originally had not. I was kind of thinking like, oh man, I hope people stay away from the World Cup. Like they should kind of maybe boycott or something. But I don't know. I think we as Americans kind of needed the World Cup because people from all over the world are showing up and they're suddenly making videos of like, you guys, why didn't you ever tell me that America was so awesome? Like I'm just been in a Taco Bell. And
yeah, okay, that I have been, that I do like. I have been seeing, people from all over the world trying American food for the first time. It's like, yeah, our food has flavor in it, you Brits.
All the people that are showing up in like the southern U.S. host cities, and they're like, I just went into a Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's is amazing. Like, it's not even like food stuff. They're just amazed that we have a gas station that thinks too highly of itself. Like, like they're just overwhelmed by like, you could go into a petrol station and get literally anything. You can barely get petrol at a petrol station in the UK, like I've been seeing a lot of those videos and like they're just overwhelmed by like, I've seen videos of people who are just being like, I'm going to go into a Costco for the first time because I saw it in a movie once and I'm just going to go see what that's like. And then they're like, oh my God, why don't we have Costco's in Europe?
What gets me is Europeans being surprised that school buses are actually yellow. They thought it was just a movie thing.
Yeah, like I saw one recently that was just a British guy who came across he was like, we just found a yellow school bus sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of wanted to think, like, it kind of did look like it was in the woods and it may have been abandoned. And you do find those sometimes. But also, like, they don't realize that, like, school bus drivers, a lot of them, especially in the South, they drive the school bus home to their house if they live out in the middle of nowhere. Like, in larger, like, cities and stuff, there will be a central bus depot where, like, you'll go and you'll pick up the bus, but, like, in a lot of the rural areas, like where I am, because the drivers are so far out and they have to start so early in the morning doing their pickup route, they are literally just allowed to drive the school bus to their house. And you will sometimes, on the outskirts of towns, like as you're getting a little bit farther out into the country, people who have to drive like rural county routes, you will just see people with like school buses parked next to their regular family car. And people will be like, if you don't know what's going on, you'd be like, did they just like buy a school bus that was being, like discontinued or something, and they're gonna like turn it into an RV or something, you know? Like, no, they are just literally a bus driver, and they have to start their route so early that it would take them like they would have to get up like an hour earlier just to travel back to the nearest bus depot and go. So in a lot of rural places, if you're a full-time bus driver, you just drive the bus home at the end of your shift. So like, I don't know if the guy found like literally an abandoned school bus or if it was like the local bus driver just parked it and it was like near the edge of the road or something. And maybe like the person's house was further down a path that the bus couldn't travel down. And he just like randomly broke into a school bus. I don't know, but like either one is a possibility because you do find both in the rural South. Either weirdly abandoned school buses just in the middle of nowhere, or people who are like, well, I can't drive the bus literally to my trailer because you have to like drive down a tiny little, dirt path to get to where I actually live. So I'm just going to leave it near the paved road and drive my car like the mile or whatever to where I actually live in the country, which is funny.
Yeah, but for because this is our 250th anniversary of America special episode, we wanted to talk about something special, something that means a lot. The very document itself that cemented 250 years of America, and that is the Declaration of Independence itself, which leads us into the movie we are going to be discussing today, National Treasure. Because what is more American than stealing the Declaration of Independence?
Well, I mean, as Nicolas Cage brings up in the movie, it is a document that is basically a monument to treason.
I mean, yeah, a bunch of people decided we are no longer going to be under your rule, and this is our, legitimately Declaration of Independence. And, screw your tea.
And he does point out that had the not then United States, but had the uprising colonials lost that original war, everybody whose name was signed on that document would have been arrested and tried and put to death because they would have been traitors to the crown. They would have, so I mean, it is kind of a fascinating thing as a document. And I mean, not just one document, of course. There are multiple copies of the Declaration of Independence, and a few have survived now. But we are specifically talking about the signed copy that's on display at the National Archives.
And when this movie came out, the National Archives, the U.S. government itself had to come out and saying, no, there is no secret map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. Apparently, this movie inspired so many people to wonder if that was an actual real thing.
Just because you see it in a movie doesn't mean it happened. Sometimes it does, sometimes there are surprising things in films that you're like, oh, that was actually a real thing. But yeah, this is not one of those things. I am going to say that watching this, I had kind of forgotten because it's been, as a lot of these movies are, it's been a while since I've seen this. This movie is like 22 years old now at time of recording. Came out in 2004, and I had seen it when it originally came out. I can't remember if I saw it in theaters or just when it was first, released for rental, but I saw it pretty quickly when it came out, and I do believe this is when I saw in theaters. And then, it got shown on TV a lot, especially around this time of year. Kind of like Independence Day, which we have talked about before. And speaking of those two things together, I had forgotten how many conspiracy theories this movie leans into.
Yeah, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons.
But just like there are other ones that are just kind of thrown out in the movie, like along with. And here's the thing, I kind of, I just got on a kick, and we're not really going to talk about like the sequel they made, or the TV show, which I still haven't seen. But I did. I had a little extra time and rewatched the sequel while I was at it. And that one is just one long conspiracy theory. And stuff they don't even get into, like, the little sidekick guy is like really into Area 51 and stuff like that, in that movie. And there's like all this other kind of stuff. But even this one, they kind of just like name check a bunch of conspiracy theories. And I was like, are we sure Roland Emmerich had nothing to do with this movie? Because it really does. There are parts of this movie that feel like it's just going into a Roland Emmerich movie,
Yeah. I mean, especially yeah.
I mean, in that similar way that we have talked about Roland Emmerich movies before, with Independence Day, and then like with Day After Tomorrow and stuff, where it was like, there was even one part of this movie where I was like, when it's at the beginning of the movie and it transitions from the bizarre series of stacking flashbacks into the quote unquote present day of the movie, and it's immediately just them standing on an ice sheet. And I'm like, okay, we've gone from that Roland Emmerich movie into Day After Tomorrow Roland Emmerich movie.
Yeah.
So the other thing that really shocked me was I had forgotten how many people other than Nicolas Cage are in this movie. And I'm talking about like people you care about, and they're not the people who are the main characters of this movie. It's like Nicolas Cage supported by two people who I did not recognize until I looked them up, and then I was like, oh yeah, I guess I have seen them in other things. But like honestly, their names and their faces were not familiar. I was like, I really thought they got more interesting people to back up Nicolas Cage in this, and then you realize all the interesting people are the side characters.
Like Harvey Keitel plays the FBI agent. Christopher Plummer plays Nicolas Cage's grandfather. John Voight plays his father. Bean is the villain.
Yeah, and like there are a bunch of people like Sean Bean's henchmen. Well, first of all, I'd forgotten Sean Bean was in this movie at all. But like Sean Bean's henchmen are more notable than like the love interest and the sidekick. As far as like, yeah, I watched him and stuff all the time. Like Mark Pellegrino is in this movie, and I was like, I had totally forgotten he was in this movie, So the three main stars, only one of them is kind of a star, although the German chick who's the love interest in these movies, apparently the other thing that I've seen her in is Inglourious Bastards. And I was like, oh, okay, I do remember her in that. And then I was like, yeah, the sidekick guy has been on some TV, I guess, but not anything that I've really watched enough to care about. So I think this was probably the
It's this and the Hangover
thing.
movies. It's this and the Hangover
I
movies.
think I watched one of the Hangover, or like half of one of the Hangover movies once, and I was like, this is stupid, and I am having no fun with this. So yeah, I'm not even sure if I got to the part where he's in it. I don't know. I don't really remember anything about the Hangover movies other than did not like. So yeah, so this appears to be the thing I know Justin Bartha, that's his name, from. But and then Diane Kruger, I know her from this and Inglourious Basterds. She was really good in Inglourious Basterds. I'll give her that. And then all the other people that are lower on the bill than them are way more interesting in their careers, and like me being able to recognize them. Like I said, I forgot Sean Bean was in this. Hey, Sean Bean, what are you doing here? And spoiler alert, he survives the movie? What? That's not how you cast Sean Bean. At least it wasn't in 2004.
Maybe he got tired of dying in movies and he said, I'll only do the movie, but don't kill me off.
Well, he did, but it wasn't until after Game of Thrones, which this was before Game of Thrones. So after Game of Thrones, he actually started having that rule where he kind of was like, I'm not really going to take stuff anymore where they kill me off. So, but in 2004, like he was still, Sean Bean is the dude you kill off in the movie. And that does not happen here. However, Sean Bean was also well known at this time for playing the villain. Like, if you saw Sean Bean show up in a movie, you were like, he's gonna be the bad guy, isn't he? So, like, even before his little heel turn in the kind of like preamble to the movie, I guess we can call it, you were just like, hey, Sean Bean's in this. That's the villain.
Shoot, when was the last? We have talked about Sean because he was in Percy Jackson.
Yeah,
So
I think that was the last time we talked about him.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Sean Bean is generally a good time when he shows up and stuff, whether or not he's playing a villain, but especially when he's playing a villain. I actually like his villain roles.
I mean, if you need a British guy to play a villain, get Sean Bean.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long list of British guys who are just like, if you need a great villain,
Yeah.
but Sean Bean, at least at this point in his career, I think we've kind of moved past that point in his career, but at this point in his career, it would have been rare to find Sean Bean as like the hero, especially in an American production.
The director and the person who came up with this concept, John Turteltaub, who we have talked about before because he directed Cool Runnings and While You Were Sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a really fascinating career, and there's actually a lot of his stuff I like. I mean, we grew up watching stuff like Three Ninjas, which, I mean, we might get around to talking about that at one point. That was a Touchstone production, but that was kind of a formative movie for us as kids. And of course, Cool Runnings we have talked about before, and While You Were Sleeping. He's done so much work for Disney. He did that weird movie with Bruce Willis called The Kid.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that one.
I do, because it was just, yeah.
Yeah, and then, going with the Nick Cage of it all, he also did Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yeah, the Disney remake that wasn't a remake.
Yeah. It was the live action remake that wasn't remaking anything and wasn't quite completely CGI, but there was a lot of CGI in that movie.
We're just taking the name of a popular cartoon and putting Nicolas Cage in it, with nothing to do with the original cartoon.
But I think maybe my favorite thing out of Turteltaub's career was something that he wasn't entirely the director for, but he was the producer for, which was a TV show that really gets forgotten that came out about 2 or 3 years after this. I don't know. It was right around the same time as this, which was called Jericho. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
I have not.
I watched the show and then I bought like the follow-up comic book that like finishes out the story because the show got canceled in the middle of the story and ended on a cliffhanger. And so they had to finish it up in a comic book series. And I was enough of a fan of this thing to like actually track down the comic book, But that was a great one. It was kind of like, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before where, I am a huge Fallout fan and you have played a lot of Fallout, even though you're not as big a fan as I am. But it was kind of like, if you are a Fallout fan, go look up Jericho. It's kind of a similar idea, but it really just is like, what would happen to like, I forget where it was set. It might be like Iowa or Idaho or Kansas or somewhere in that, they grow a lot of corn and there's a lot of flat, you know. But they it was like, what would happen if you were in just kind of a small town in that part of the US and the entire United States got hit by a coordinated nuclear attack. And then, like, after the first, like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so of the opening episode, it's just a weirdly post-apocalyptic show. That also really leaned in a lot on conspiracy theories, in the idea of a bunch of people have to get together to form a conspiracy, you know? So I loved it, and it had a great cast, and weirdly, the person who led the cast was Skeet Ulrich. So, you know, blast from the past there. But it was a really good series, and I recommend that you if anything I just said sounds interesting to you, you hunt it down and look it up, because it is a very interesting take on that idea. So, I mean, Turtle Top, much more interesting career than somebody like Roland Emmerich, but also this has Jerry Bruckheimer behind it.
Yeah, Jerry Bruckheimer. We've talked about him a bunch of times, and his production company did a lot of movies for Disney around this time.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the last time we talked about him might have been Armageddon when we
On
were
there.
going through those. But I mean, you know, we've talked about him when we talked about Pirates of the Caribbean, because he had a hand in that. But if you loved an action movie in the 90s, man, you loved a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. Because he did, like, Con Air with Nicolas Cage, you know, and The Rock with Nicolas Cage. But he also did that really interesting, I'm not necessarily saying in a it's a great movie way, but in a it's also kind of leaning into this kind of thing where that Will Smith movie, Enemy of the State, if you remember that one, it wasn't one of his, like, biggest hits, but, you know, he did the Bad Boys as well. And then, you know, like we said, all the other things that we have talked about before on the show. But, like, man, Bruckheimer and Turtletop teaming up for this one was kind of always gonna make it a hit, I think. Like,
Yeah.
those two together was just, especially in, like, 2004, that was, like, kind of a production dream team.
So let's kind of get into this. As you mentioned, this whole opening part is just flashbacks upon flashbacks, because we flash back to, okay, before we even get there, I do want to get into the Gates family, because Christopher Plummer plays John Adams Gates, and then you have John Voight playing his son, Patrick Henry Gates, and then you have Nicolas Cage as the grandson, Benjamin Franklin Gates. All of them named after founding fathers. It's very interesting that if they were to go into, like, Nicolas Cage's character has a son of his own, would he be George Washington Gates? Would he be Alexander Hamilton Gates? I don't know.
Now, I was thinking, like, what happens if this family has a daughter? Do they get, like, Abigail Adams Gates? You know, like
Betsy Ross Gates.
yeah, it's like who do you name your daughters after? You know, it's like the Gates family, only men as far as we know, because who needs a woman, right?
Yeah. Wife is mentioned at some point with the father that we never find out anything else about it. Don't know if she's dead or divorced.
We don't in this movie, but she's played by Helen Mirren in the second movie and is a massive part of that plotline.
I never saw the sequel, so I'll tell you. Sorry, but
it's not as good, but it does put a lot of stuff in this movie into, like, either it expands upon it or it completely contradicts it. Because in this one, and this is part of the opening scene, which takes place in the early 70s and the early 1970s. Let me put that, because we have so many flashbacks. And so, like, we start in a already in a flashback, because this is a modern day movie to the period it was made. So it's very much a movie set in 2004. But it starts in the 70s when Nicolas Cage's character is a little kid, and his grandfather is telling him the story of this treasure. And in order to tell him the story of this treasure, we go from a flashback to a flashbacker to an even more flashbackier flashback. And then we flash forward a little bit, but we're still not back in the 70s. And then we, like, it's like, if you play a drinking game to every time they change time periods in the first 10 minutes of this movie, you will be dead before Sean Bean ever shows up.
Yeah. So, yeah, Nicolas Cage's Benjamin's grandfather tells him the story of the hidden treasure somewhere in the United States that has ties to the Knights Templar and the Freemasons and the Founding Fathers. But Jon Voight's character, who plays Nicolas Cage's father, is very skeptical about it. It's like, it's a legend. It's a myth. Later in the movie, he says, American founding fathers created the clues just to keep the British busy. There is no treasure.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this is they make Jon Voight's character be. He even says at one point in the movie, Jon Voight says, I was the weird one in the family because I actually settled down and got, a job and a 401k and health insurance and stuff, and everybody else in the family for generations now have just been like weird treasure hunters.
Obsessed with this particular treasure.
Well, yeah, or it seems like other ones, according to some of the thing, because it does seem like Nicolas Cage prior to this has been on like side quests looking for other treasure while he's been searching this one down. But the funny thing about that is that you mentioned like, oh, in this movie, like we assume he has a mom, but she's never really mentioned, and all, and then she's a major character in the second movie. Well, this whole first movie is like the Gates family, who have all been obsessed with this treasure, except for Jon Voight's character, the dad, who was apparently the weird one that never bought into the treasure hunt and spent his life being like the sensible one. Except in the second movie, apparently, like, both of Nicolas Cage's parents were treasure hunters at some point. They completely rewrite Jon Voight's character. So, way to go there, sequel. This whole thing is supposedly like a member of the Gates family just happened to be driving the carriage that took one of the founding fathers or politicians or something. One of the guys who signed the Declaration, I forget which one, but
Charles Carroll, they mention here.
Thank you. Yeah, Charles Carroll, who was one of the signers of the Declaration and was the final one to die. And he knows he's going to die very soon and is near the end of his life. And so he rushes to the White House to have an audience with the president, except the president is gone. And since this is like the late 17 to maybe early 1800s, I forget. They're like, it's not like he could call ahead and be like, be sure the president's at the White House. I need to talk to him. So he rushes to the White House. The president's not there. And he's like, I have to tell someone before I die. So I'm just going to tell my carriage driver, I guess, because he's the only one here. Like, there's nobody else in the White House that's like important. Like,
where's the vice president? Where's the Secretary of State? Maybe he didn't trust him. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But anyway, so he ends up like telling his like coach driver all about this treasure and gives the final clue, which is that the secret lies with Charlotte. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna die now, or whatever. And basically the treasure is like all of these antiquities and gold, but mostly just like historical artifacts, they say at the beginning of the movie, that the Knights Templar, who then became the Freemasons, according to this movie. And then several Freemasons were among the founding fathers. That's the only part of that that's really true, I think. Had guarded this treasure because they were like, oh, this amount of money is too much for one man to have, even a king. Like, you shouldn't have this. This would give you too much power over other people and the world to have this much concentrated wealth.
As we just crowned the first trillionaire in 2026.
Yeah. So they decide to hide this treasure because it's, no one man, even a king, should have this much wealth, which, it's really fascinating to me that nobody had the idea of maybe like distributing this treasure until Nicolas Cage comes along.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's not until the end of the movie where Nicolas Cage, after he finds the treasure, his idea is to distribute it to various museums and such.
Much like the Indiana Jones he was kind of sort of based on.
Yeah, I mean, that I do remember there were a lot of film reviewers who were comparing this to Indiana Jones, and there is a little James Bond in here. I mean, I get that it was not new, but if you were a player like myself of the Metal Gear Solid series, there's a lot of that in here.
Yeah, and I mean, all that stuff predates Indiana Jones and stuff too. It's just that, we're kids of that era. So that's our immediate touchstone. But like once we get to present day 2004, we do find out, like once the FBI starts investigating him, that apparently in that time skip between being told about the treasure as a child and turning into Nicolas Cage, Ben has gone out and specifically studied and done things in his life that would make him ready for this exact thing. Like, it's very clear he was always training for this one thing. He gets a degree in history, he gets a degree in engineering, he like studies up on architecture and whatever. He goes through some like diving training and stuff to be able to like do things in harsh conditions and everything. And then of course the first time we see Nicolas Cage, he's like in the Arctic hunting down the Charlotte, which it turns out to have been a ship and not a person.
Yeah, a ship that has been buried under the ice in the Arctic. I do like Riley, the sidekick, kind of goes, I'm no expert, but it's possible that this all was open sea at one point, and then the ship sunk, and then the ice came over it. Like, he tells it better in the movie than I am, but it's like he goes through that I'm no expert, and then he shows that he's a lot smarter than he puts on.
Well, and the thing is, yeah, I do like that introduction to Riley because it's very clear that Sean Bean, in this kind of trio of treasure hunters that we are given at the beginning, which is Nicolas Cage, the sidekick Riley, who I have already forgotten the actor's name despite just saying it recently. I'm sorry to this man. I'm sorry. I'm glad you still have a career for somebody. It just hasn't been stuff I've watched. I'm sorry. So, Riley and Nicolas Cage's Ben, and then Sean Bean, who is playing a character called Ian, I think.
Ian Ho.
Yeah. And Ian is only there because he has money. Like, it's very obvious that he's not an intelligent person, he's just a rich person. I mean, he is smart in some ways. He's smart in, like, logistics and getting people together and making a plan. Like, his plan to steal the Declaration of Independence is pretty interesting,
Mm-hmm.
And it would have worked had Nicolas Cage not gotten there, like, 5 minutes before him,
That entire stealing the Declaration of Independence seemed to put it to kind of reference it to a different franchise is very Mission Impossible like.
Yeah, it does go into a little bit of like, the kind of modern Tom Cruise quote unquote Mission Impossible stuff. Fun fact, I have never seen a Mission Impossible movie past the first one because I was so pissed off about the first one that I was like, well, this is like, everyone's going to hate this. And now there are like 14 Mission Impossible movies because apparently none of you watched the actual TV series. Because if you did, you would have quit halfway through the first movie.
Same. And also starring John Voight in that first movie.
Yeah. But to get back to the Sean Bean character, Sean Bean, I mean, we did kind of just allude to Elon Musk, but he is kind of just that guy. He is just the money behind this operation. Nicolas Cage apparently found him at some point and said, my family are all treasure hunters because we got told this story about the. And Sean Bean was like, I can throw like a few 100,000, $1 million or so dollars on this expedition because if there really is a treasure, I will be much richer. Okay. And he, he was like, I got money and nothing but time, so let's go on a treasure hunt.
And I like how Riley kind of puts it up to like any other person that could have helped them before this. Like anyone that could have helped him won't believe them, and anyone who would believe them won't help them. So it was just this guy.
Yeah, it was like this one guy had the resources. We're never told exactly how he got his money or how much money he has, but at one point Nicolas Cage says in the movie he's got nearly infinite resources. So he is supposed to be like an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or a Zuckerberg or something before we had heard of most of those guys, Go back to 2004 and well, I mean Bill Gates in 2004. So, maybe that's your standpoint if you're watching this in 2004. But he's just the rich guy bankrolling this, and it's very obvious from the beginning that he is not there for his brains because Ben and Riley, that's an interesting combination of names. Somebody should come up with a character named Ben Riley and do something with that. Maybe with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, with Ben Riley with Nicolas Cage, that will never work.
I don't know what that could be, but it might be good and a worthwhile project for somebody to pursue. Just thought. Anyway, so Ben and Riley are really the two brains behind this. Ben has all the historical knowledge, and Riley is kind of the guy in the chair who gets out of the chair more often than most guys of that type do. There is a lot of guy in the chair moments for Riley in this movie.
But he's also not an idiot. Like, he does know some historical facts. It's just that they're the same historical facts that Ben knows, and always like, hey, did you know? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But his real use to that is like he's more the technology person. Ben kind of stuck with more practical things that would have been important knowledge hundreds of years ago when the founding fathers would have been doing all this. He's really good at like mechanical engineering of things that we see quite a few times, with like actual building things and putting things together and making things work and, gears and levers and things like that. But Riley is more the computer engineering guy. And they make a good team. I kind of like this team. As much as Riley can be like an annoying little,
He is definitely comic relief coded in this movie.
Yeah, and he's also he's a bit misogynistic because he has a lot of jokes. It's worse in the second movie, but it starts in this movie where he keeps going like, well, you got the girl, so I guess that's all that you I don't even get like a girlfriend out of it or whatever, like
I just get this really expensive car.
Yeah, I just get this really expensive car. But they find this ship in the first couple of minutes, and this is when we have Sean Bean's very obvious that it was coming heel turn, when he's like, well, I guess I don't need you two anymore and can just make you go kaboom in a ship that was carrying a lot of gunpowder.
Yeah, once they figured out that the next clue is the Declaration of Independence, oh, I'm just going to have to steal the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, we're not going to let you do that. Well, I'm just going to have to kill you then.
Yeah, that is kind of the way that goes. But of course, Ben is smart enough to be able to get him and Riley out of that situation. And they're able to get back and start trying to warn people about a plot to steal the Declaration of Independence. And this was another thing I'd forgotten about the movie. Because you remember when, in the lead up to this movie, that the entire marketing for this movie, and the main thing most people remember about it is, oh, that's the movie where Nicolas Cage steals the Declaration of Independence. And that was the entire marketing for this movie. And you want to talk about like people who are like, trailers give away too much of the movie.
The stealing of the Declaration is the end of Act 1 of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, they really get into, they go from like introducing you to the character to we are actively in the plot to steal the Declaration of Independence in like the first like 25 minutes of this movie.
If this was like a Ocean's 11 or even a Fast and the Furious type of movie, the climax of the movie would be the stealing of the Declaration. Here, it is the start. It is within the first half hour of this movie.
It is basically the inciting incident, almost, you know? And the funny thing is that the reason that they're like, we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence is because they explain it in the movie for people who didn't know, you know, for like an international audience and stuff. But I think a lot of Americans knew immediately, like, even if you haven't personally visited Washington, D.C., and been to the National Archives and seen the room where the Declaration and the Constitution and all that is kept. I don't know if you've ever been. I mean, it was one of those, like, they took us on a school trip when I was like in 7th or 8th grade. So I was able to go like literally with my public school. Not everybody, of course, but you know, there was like a small group from the school that got to go to Washington, D.C. for something or other. And we toured a lot of historic sites, including going to the National Archives and seeing those documents. That was part of our planned school trip. So I have been in that room, and even just standing in that room, even the most like uneducated person about all this stuff, if you just like see images in that of that room or video of that room, or you stand in that room, you immediately realize that it's not just like there's some art on a wall in a museum, let's go steal that. You know, like people might make a movie about like, oh, let's steal the Mona Lisa or something, which I have also, you know, been to the Louvre and seen that. But being in both those places at both those times, I would be like, it would be much easier to steal the Mona Lisa than it would be to steal the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution or, you know, any of that.
Riley even says it. It's easier to steal the Washington Monument than it is to steal the Declaration. And look at that reflecting pool.
I know, that was the moment in the movie where I was like, man, that was not a thing that I really expected to hit me so hard. But yeah, current year 2026, seeing a picture of like pre-2026 reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. just kind of hits you in the feels. But yeah, I mean, they literally sit on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and stare across the reflecting pool at the Washington Monument and plan how they're going to steal the Declaration. And Riley does point out, like, not only is it behind a case lined with bulletproof glass, but it's got heat sensors and it drops into a vault every night. And, you know, I mean, it's like, it's not just sitting there in a room with a couple of guards. It's like there's all this mechanical stuff that is meant to protect it from not just theft, but like natural disasters and like all this other kind of stuff, or intentional attacks, you know?
Yeah. But I do like how, I mean, that scene and that transition into the Library of Congress, where they go into the deep dive of the security system of the National Archives.
Yeah, and all that stuff, for as far as I can tell, is all factual to at least 2004. I think they've upgraded the security a little bit since then, but at least at the time the movie was made, pretty much all this stuff was kind of known to the public and relatively easy to find out. And so they do go through that, but I like how they're like, so we have to figure out a way to get it moved from its usual spot, which would, any disruption to that case or whatever literally does trigger like an automatic shutdown sequence where it's like, okay, close up the case and drop the Declaration, the Constitution, everything that's in that room into their safety vaults,
Yeah. Which is why they need Dr. Abigail Chase, Diane Kruger's character.
Yeah. Who, at first, they're like, you're not even an American. And she has to point out, yes, I am. I was just born in Germany. So, shout out to immigrants making our country better.
To quote someone else, immigrants, we get the job done.
Yeah. So I do like that there is that there is a recent immigrant on the team who has to point out, like, I am also an American and these documents are also important to me.
And she has a bit of an obsession with American history in the same way that Ben does. She has a almost complete collection of George Washington campaign buttons.
Yeah, which are, like pewter and other cast metal pins. They're not what we think of as campaign buttons today, but, similar, same purpose.
She's missing one, and that one just happens to be the one that is in Ben's collection.
Or that at least he has access to. I don't know if they never really get into the movie about whether or not it's in his personal collection already or whether he just knows somebody who's willing to sell it to him.
He said he found it. He found it once. We never figured out how he found it. It's just, he found it.
Yeah. So it might be that he knows a collector willing to sell it, or it was already, but considering that we later find out that his father and his family had originals of letters penned by Benjamin Franklin himself, that Dr. Chase is even shocked to know that anybody is in possession of those originals,
Mm-hmm.
Although, if anybody had the original, it's a point in the movie that Ben loses access to his scans after he steals the Declaration because the FBI realizes it too fast, and he's not able to get back to his clean room and stuff, which apparently is just like in his apartment.
Yeah, apparently,
and have a third place to go to,
because he screws it up, and Riley even chastised him for it. It's like, because after the whole theft of the Declaration, he's walking around and he cuts through a souvenir shop, and they think that he's stealing one of the souvenirs, so he has to pay for it, but he doesn't have the money, so he pays it with a credit card, and that is the downfall of their whole thing.
Yeah, because he has given, up until this point, he has given the FBI and Dr. Chase a fake name just to protect himself, and also because the Gates family name is not respected. They are well-known kooks.
Because of this obsession with the treasure.
Yeah, so to most of the academic community or the historical community or anybody else who might try to look them up, the Gates family is just like, oh, that group of weirdos with their own unique conspiracy theory that nobody else subscribes to but them.
And this is kind of where I say that's like the Mission Impossible part, because using the Washington campaign badge dipped in lemon juice to get Dr. Chase's fingerprints to get access to the documents. Yeah, that is right out of Mission Impossible.
No, he uses his access to Abigail, which he's bought her some slight goodwill. Like, he goes to her at first to be like, look, you're like the head archivist at the archives or whatever. And he's like, I believe somebody's going to try to steal the Declaration of Independence. And I love this scene because it is really funny depending on your level of English vocabulary, because it is so funny to watch Ben try to say there's a treasure map on the back of the Declaration without saying those words. And he's like, there may be some cartography. And she's like, so a map on the Declaration that may lead to a sum of lucrative objects of intrinsic value. So treasure. It's a great scene. The way Nicolas Cage plays it is just so perfect, because it's one of the few like understated Nicolas Cage performances.
I like it because it shows that Ben has said this story so many times that he had to find a way to rephrase it to not make himself sound crazy.
That he's hoping to trick her for long enough that she doesn't realize that he's like, we think there's a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence, because he knows how it sounds if you're not him, you know? And I love that. And it's such a great scene of like, she's been impressed with his knowledge of history, because he comes into her office and immediately sees her collection and is able to spot the one thing missing, knows exactly what it is, knows exactly, you know? And she's like, oh, this guy actually does know his history. That is very impressive. And then it's like, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a nutter, like, okay, get out of my office. But she says it very kindly.
You're a treasure hunter. I like how he gets like, with disdain in her voice, you're a treasure hunter. I'm more of a treasure protector.
Yeah, but it is really hilarious that he's like going through all that, because, you know, once they leave, they realize like the only way really to get into the archives where it will be slightly less guarded is to get in during the kind of yearly fundraiser gala. He's able to sneak into the gala by pretending to be just a workman. But the connection with Dr. Chase is that once she sees him at the party, because he gave her a fake name and was able to present her this theoretically very expensive gift, she fully buys it when he shows up at the party and he's like, you know, I saw a flyer in your office and decided to make a substantial last-minute donation, you know, just because I believe in history and the archives and stuff. And she does buy it, because it is a plausible story from everything he has shown her to that point. She doesn't realize that he's not like an ultra wealthy guy, you know? And so that's how he's able to get in and steal her fingerprints off of her champagne glass and stuff and use it to break into, you know, the archival protection room.
So yeah, and this whole scene where he's, you know, going into the restoration room of the Declaration and unscrewing the frame, and very it's interesting how gently he's rolling it up and putting it into like the container versus how all three of them treat it for the rest of the movie. It's very careful. He's wearing gloves. He's very, very careful. And then for the rest of the movie, they're using their bare hands. They're doing whatever. It's like, oh, okay.
Well, the thing is I also tracked that in the movie, but I do think that it's kind of a fascinating degeneration in the way that it's being handled, because you can tell that Sean Bean's character has no care for this as either a document of intrinsic worth, as Ben would put it, or for historical value.
He literally says, "If you screw me over, I'm gonna turn that into mulch."
Yeah. But when Ben first gets, when they have their little confrontation, when both of them arrive there at basically the same moment, and Ben just gets there like 2 or 3 minutes ahead of Ian, there is a moment where there's that little fake out where Ben switches out the real declaration for the kind of, replica fake that's in the gift shop. He gives that to her and he's like, okay. And then Ian kidnaps her to be like, oh, she's got the document. Let's go. And when Ben is touching it to put it into the case, the carry case that we see like in the poster for the movie, even, he is wearing like archival cotton gloves and he is very delicately treating it because he has respect for it. When they get it, when Ian gets it, what he thinks is the real document, he just kind of puts his bare hands in and pulls it out of the plastic protection sleeve and then realizes like, oh, I've been duped. This is just a replica. But you can tell that he never had any plan to treat it with any dignity or care. But even after stealing it, Ben is like, okay, I have to test it. And I'm not able to do it in the clean room environment that I set up because, the FBI know it was me now and they've got my real name and my home address and stuff because of the credit card. And so he's not able to get back to his like archival protection room that he has set up in his apartment. And he has to take it to his dad's house. And even there, though, they put on cotton gloves. They are being very careful with how they are treating it. They are very, and then even once they're on the run and they have to unroll it again in Philadelphia later in the movie, he uses the plastic sleeve to protect it from the oils on his fingers. And, it's really fascinating because even new parchment or vellum, which is, and John Voight's character mentions it, this is made from animal skin, but it's not made from tanned animal skin. So like if you have a real leather jacket made from real animal hide, okay? You can touch it with your hands and everything because the tanning process kind of protects the skin itself from some of the accumulation of oils of just casually touching it and everything. Not fully, but there is a bit more, it's like it kind of gives it a slight bit of waterproofing. It kind of gives it, just in that process. But parchment and vellum is made from untanned skin. Yes, I'm a medieval reenactor. Ask me how I know. But when you handle those real, even brand new ones, because you can still get traditionally made ones now, and I've had to handle them before. Like even new ones, just touching them with your bare fingers, you can leave permanent residual marks on it because they're that porous. And so it is really fascinating, like how delicate he's trying to be up until the first time I noticed him handling it without any protection was towards the end of the movie when Ian has them all kidnapped and has his like father at gunpoint. And he's like, okay, Ben, take a look at the map again and tell me. And it's like, at that point, it's like, yes, he still has respect for the document. And you can tell that Nicolas Cage treats the document, in his acting as if this is a guy who's trying not to do too much damage, but also it's like, weapon to your father's head or no, I'm sorry, I can't touch the Declaration of Independence without proper cotton gloves, you know?
Yeah.
So I was actually really impressed with the way that, different characters treat that document once they know what it is and what it says about their character.
When John Voight realizes that this document that they're trying to figure out what's on the back of it is the Declaration, he freaks out like, oh my God, what have you done?
Yeah, he's the only one that kind of touches it. And I think he even puts on like some latex gloves or something.
Because he doesn't know it's the Declaration. He doesn't know at first, oh yeah, just throw it in the oven. You got to warm it up if it's.
And they're like, it's really old and it's really delicate, so we don't want to do that. But they haven't told him what it is. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to put on a pair of gloves and go see what it is. And when he picks it up and he's like, oh my God, what have you done?
And like you said, he had the original Ben Franklin letters to his brother's newspaper, but he's donated them to a museum. So now they have to go to Philadelphia to this museum to get the letters to figure out what this code on the back of the Declaration means.
And I think this is one of their more inventive bits of like, how do we get these characters to this bit of the clue while still keeping them away from the FBI? Because they're on the run from the FBI at that point. And they're able to outrun the FBI because the FBI does not know where they're going at first. But they know that like every place with any sort of like high security, the FBI has probably already sent out, Ben's picture to any place being like, hey, we want you to be on high alert and look for this man. And so they pay a school child, like, what's this boy? Probably like 12 maybe, tops. And they send him in because it's not unusual to see school children in a museum in the middle of the day,
Yeah, and if they had gone in themselves, hey, there's cameras there. They're already kind of outing themselves, and they don't want to do that.
He's got to be number one on the FBI's most wanted list at this moment. There's got to be a national manhunt for this guy. And so I love the fact that they just find this kid who was probably either with a school group at the museum or is just playing hooky from school, I guess, maybe, for the day.
He is in a school uniform with a backpack, so either or.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, I'll give you $1 for every chunk of letters you go in because it's part of a cipher, and they need to count, the letters on a certain page in a certain row and the certain letter in that row and everything, which is a real way of doing ciphers, and it's, really kind of awesome. And so Riley takes a little Post-it notes and writes a little grid for the boy with like, okay, you find this page, you count each line, you count each letter, and then you write down what the letter is, And he teaches the kid like how to do it without telling him what he's doing. And he's like, but I'll pay you money every time you bring me another set of letters. And he's able to get everything but the last 4 letters, but by that point, he's already figured out what the clue is going to say.
Yeah, he figures out that the next clue is the Liberty Bell.
Yeah, which at the time that the clues were written would have been still in Independence Hall being used as the primary bell. That was before it developed the crack that caused it to be decommissioned and, brought out of the building and put in front of the building in its own special case and, all that kind of stuff. So they're like, okay, we've got to go up into the bell tower. And I like throughout the course of these movies, depending on the perceived value or importance of certain items or places, how hard or easy it is for them to gain access to certain things. So I like that, like, the Declaration was very, very, very difficult. And then the letters that Ben Franklin wrote were also difficult in the sense of it would have been very easy had the FBI not been looking for him. You know, the FBI looking for him was the only thing that made that difficult. And then I like that by the time they get to Independence Hall and they're like, we need to get up in the bell tower, they really just have to skirt past a couple of security guards and jump over a rope barrier, you know, which I love. Because, you know, it's like all the theoretically important stuff that people would want to steal is like on the ground floor or the second floor, but it's not in the bell tower. The only thing in the bell tower is the giant bell that replaced the Liberty Bell. And it's really difficult for just somebody to, like, you know, shove that in their pocket and walk out the door, you know?
Yeah, but the bell isn't even important. What's important is
the vantage point. Yeah.
From the vantage point, you could see where the next clue is. And it's these pair of spectacles that Benjamin Franklin made, you know, the guy that created the bifocals.
I do like that, but Ben Franklin creating 3D glasses is maybe a step too far. I mean, that's the point in this movie where I'm like, I was kind of with you up until literally this moment.
Yeah, you don't believe Ben Franklin created 3D glasses in the red and the blue?
Yeah.
Maybe a time-traveling British man helped him make it.
Maybe. They do look like something more out of Doctor Who than out of, you know, this kind of movie.
And then they used the Ben Franklin 3D specs to read an extra message on the back here at the wall. And yeah.
Of course, it's the Dutch spelling of here, and that means where Wall Street and here Street, you know, intersect and everything. But of course, now it's Wall Street and Broadway, and so we're off to New York. But in Philadelphia, they lose the Declaration to Ian, and the FBI catches up with Ben. So now Ben is in FBI custody, and Ian has the Declaration. So, boy, are we screwed.
But I do like how, you know, in all of this, it's Dr. Chase that takes the lead at that point. Because he's like, hey, you used to work with this guy, right? Do you still have his phone number?
Yeah, she asked Riley, she's like, well, why don't we just call Ian? Like, do you have a way to contact him?
So anyway, now that Ben is in FBI custody, he gets the call from Ian saying, yeah, you can ask your girlfriend how I knew you were where you were. And as the FBI agent says, someone is going to jail for this. And right now it looks like it's going to be Ben. And Ben does not want to go to jail. You know what happens to pretty boys in jail?
Well, I mean, you know, he has been imprisoned before, just in a different Jerry Bruckheimer movie. But the interesting thing about this is that, you know, even though it was a dumb idea to split the party, because it's always a dumb idea to split the party, in one way it does kind of help out here, because Ben has the idea of like, okay, I'll take the glasses, you take the Declaration, and we'll run in separate directions, because he needs both of them to be able to access the clue. And unfortunately, the FBI gets Ben, and Ian gets the Declaration from Dr. Chase and Riley. And so they're like, okay, you know, as Dr. Chase puts it later in the movie when she meets back up with Ben, she was like, well, it turns out that it's a criminal offense to break somebody out of FBI custody, and we only knew one criminal to help. So, which I think is kind of a fun point there. But Ian knows about Ben's background, including the fact that he was trained in Navy diving techniques. And so that I actually think this is maybe after using the school kid to go in and get the clues for them. This bit about where Ian is like, oh, you want to escape the FBI? Just jump off the side of an aircraft carrier into the water, which, by the way, bad idea. That is like a 4-story drop or something. Like, I forget exactly how it is, but like, unless you know exactly how to do it, which Ben does, fortunately, and even then they point out correctly, go for this movie, by the way, that is going to be a almost impossible to survive jump for anybody other than a highly trained diver. And not just a regular scuba diver, but like somebody who's been trained in like military ocean rescue kind of diving. And so Ian is able to make that jump without dying on impact with the water, which basically anybody not him would do. And then there is a diver under the water with like a little motorized submarine thing to give him supplemental oxygen, and then they use this little underwater motor submarine thing to like drag them, far enough away from the FBI faster than a human could swim, which means he's able to get across the river and into New Jersey, which I love.
And it is while in FBI custody that Ben realizes that the spectacles can read different messages on the back of the declaration.
Yeah, depending on which color of lens you're looking through and which combination of lenses you're looking through, it'll reveal different messages. So it turns out that there was more to the message than just the few words that they caught with the regular spectacles in the original configuration that he looked through.
But as a little bit of insurance, Ian's group has kidnapped Ben's father just to make sure Ben complies and doesn't try to double cross anybody.
Yeah. But basically they make a deal at this point, which is like, Ian is like, look, all I really care about is the treasure. I don't care about the Declaration of Independence. I don't care about, Benjamin Franklin's hidden spectacles or whatever. You can have all that and you can take it back to the FBI and try to use that as your bargaining chip to get a lesser sentence or whatever. Just lead me to the treasure, because Ben is the one that can understand the clues, like Heere not being a misspelling of Here, but actually a reference to the name of the street before it was renamed Broadway. And Ben, as we have already said, not that sort of smart. He's just the guy with the money. He's not the guy with the knowledge. And so he's like, all right, I need you to decipher the clues, but the second you lead me to the treasure, I'll let you and your father and your little girlfriend and your little computer wacky guy and whatever, you can all go. I'll give you the Declaration. I'll give you the Ben Franklin spectacles. I don't care, but I want the actual treasure at the end of this treasure map. And Ben's like, okay, fair enough.
And through the spectacles, and they desecrate a grave, they end up in a hidden pathway underneath the church that has been there for over 200 years. Even Ben's father saying, yeah, I'm not walking this pathway. This thing could buckle at any time because it is over 200 years old.
This is the point where we get, and I do want to talk about this, because once they get to this point under Trinity Church in New York City, which is where the treasure ends up being buried, we discover, they have to go down this massively excavated, sinkhole, basically, lined with wooden stairs and, a rope and pulley like elevator system and everything. And a lot of it is rotting, as you just, said that Ben's father points out immediately. And it does cost Sean Bean one of his henchmen. Farewell to thee, henchman. You were a good henchman, and you died a hench's death.
The only henchman in this movie that had lines.
Yeah. But once you realize the massive scale of this excavation and construction and everything, and the movie just chalks this up to, well, they were the Freemasons, they were the builders, they were the people who knew construction, which, okay, maybe originally. All right, maybe, the modern Freemasons do claim to trace their lineage back to stone workers of antiquity and builders and architects and stuff. And some of that's partially true. And a lot of the people who were known to be members of the Freemasons at this time, or at the time these clues were set up and this treasure pit was dug and everything, were people who would have known about these sorts of complex engineering and stuff. I mean, Benjamin Franklin was one of them, But we do know that other people who were a member of the more, the contemporary Freemasons at the time, they had a lot of these skills, sure. But even by the 1700s, when all of this is taking place, supposedly, Freemasons was kind of just a more elite club for, the powerful and the wealthy and businessmen and, movers and shakers in that kind of realm. It wasn't like a secret society of tradesmen who all had the skills. And also, it wasn't as widespread as like the Masons are today. Like, I live in a very small rural town. I can think of at least 3 Masonic lodges that are in my small rural town for various groups connected with the Freemasons, okay? There weren't that many. It was a far more like elitist club in comparison to percent of the population in the 1700s. And I'm just gonna say the amount of just manual labor this would have taken, even if you'd have had like every Mason in the fledgling United States at the time working on this one project in New York City by hand, you would probably not have had enough manpower to do this job, which is where the whole secret society conspiracy thing falls down for me, because there's that old saying about, like, what is it, like, 2 people can keep a secret if one of them is dead, kind of thing. And that's kind of true. It's like, the more people who know a thing, the less likely it is to remain a secret. And as you pointed out to me off mic, we just recently had like a leaked list of the membership of kind of an elite private group, that people are kind of comparing to these kind of like conspiracy theory, whatever. And there are lots of groups like this with like private membership lists and stuff like that. But the thing is that this sort of project would have required so much outside labor that somebody would have been like, hey, aren't you also working on that giant secret pit in the middle of New York? Like, there would have been more families with stories of like, and that's how your great-great-grandpappy made a living for like 5 years, was just moving dirt out of a weird hole in New York City. And now we can't find that hole. Nobody knows what that project was for, but it bought us this nice house and generated generational wealth for our family. Isn't that weird? Like, it would have been like in too many people's like family history at this point.
Yeah, but the movie needs to happen, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, like, strangely, this movie is bizarrely realistic for me up until this point in the movie.
So eventually they used that lever and pulley elevator system to find what they believe to be the treasure room, but the treasure room is empty. And okay, this whole thing was for nothing. Even if the treasure was here, it's possible that someone else came in here and stole the treasure, possibly even around the 1800s when that legend was passed down into their family the first time. And Ian isn't having it. Like, I came here for a treasure. There's no treasure. I'm just going to kill you all. But Ben's father is quick on the thing. He's been saying this the whole movie, you know, clues leading to more clues. That's all they want, is to confuse the British. Clues to confuse the British.
Well, here's the British. Let's confuse him.
So he throws up a fake clue that he makes up on the spot. Oh, there's one lantern here that corresponds to the lantern that Paul Revere had at Old North Church in Boston. That's the next clue. And Ian buys it. He says, yeah, okay, but I don't need you anymore. If that's where, if you know, going from one church to the other, lantern to lantern, okay, when I go there, I'll get and if the treasure's there, I'll come back for you. If it's not there, then you'll all die in this tomb. So that does buy them a little bit of time. So yeah, Ian doesn't kill them all, but they're still stuck in this underground tomb. There's no way out until we get to the thing we have, you know, the secret is in Charlotte, comes right back again, as it turns out the key to the real treasure room is the very pipe that they found at the very beginning of the movie on the Charlotte. And they use it to find the real treasure room, and it's a very elaborate scene where they light up a torch and it lights up the entire room, and I cannot do that scene justice with words.
Yeah, this is the visual set piece of the entire movie, is like Ben realizing like, oh, there's oil running in these troughs and we've got these torches. Let's, you know, light the oil and see. And it turns out to be the lighting system for the entire treasure room, which suddenly lights up. And then this is the one point in the movie where I kind of wanted to punch somebody, because they make Riley look dumber than he is, which I did not like. Where he goes and hugs what is obviously a statue of an Egyptian pharaoh and says, like, statue of a blue-green guy with a weird beard. I'm sure that's important and really expensive somehow, or whatever. And he hugs it. And I'm like, okay, but like, even random school children would be able to be like, that's a statue of an Egyptian pharaoh, you know? They might not get anything else about the history right, but they would have at least been able to recognize that part of it. And he's just, he's looking at this like, I don't know, I found a statue. It looks sort of humanoid and it has a weird beard. I suppose this is important somehow. And it's like, dude, you know that Ben Franklin was the first person to suggest daylight saving time. And yes, it's daylight saving, not savings. Get it right, Riley. But like, you know that bit about history, but you don't know literally any Egyptian iconography, as obsessed as the Western world is with like ancient Egyptian pharaohs. Seriously? Come on, my dude. Like, this is a dude who has never watched The Mummy. I do not believe that. I do not buy that Riley, the character from this movie, has never watched the Brendan Fraser movie, The Mummy.
At least the old Universal version.
Even that one. But yeah, no. But I mean, this was 2004. The Mummy had come out by this point. It was a big hit. This dude in this movie has seen Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. But the other thing that makes me salty is that the second thing that they're like, oh, this is of importance, is Dr. Chase sees a bunch of scrolls and goes, it's the saved books from the Library of Alexandria. And I'm like, okay, movie, you just crossed a line. Because there are some of us who are still salty about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. And I know most of them. So do not mess with the hole in my heart that is the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah, they're able to find the exit. They call the FBI. And they tell them, yeah, the treasure is just underneath the church. And it's worth billions of dollars. And yeah.
And this is when we realize that Harvey Keitel's character has had a secret motive this whole time.
Yeah, we see that he has a ring with the symbol of the Freemasons on it.
And it's impossible that Ben had not noticed that before now. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people that are in the Freemasons that those rings are impossible to miss. They are huge and gaudy and ridiculous. And if you see somebody wearing one, you're gonna notice it.
But he notices it now because the script needs him to notice it now.
Yeah, I know. And he's like, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll show you exactly how to get down to the treasure and everything. And this is when, now that Harvey Keitel has been outed as kind of a member of this conspiracy or whatever, he's like, the Masons believed that no one person should have this amount of wealth. What do you want to do with it? And Ben's like, it was never about the money. I don't really care about money. Distribute it, like send it all back to museums in their home country. Let the world have it. And he's like, I really just want to make sure that Dr. Chase doesn't even have a Post-it note attached to her employment file, which I found a funny way of putting it. And he's like, and I would kind of really like to not go to jail. And Harvey Keitel brings up, well, somebody has to go to jail, which leads to the best part of the movie.
Meanwhile, in Boston at the Old North Church.
Yeah, Ian is trying to find a way to break in when suddenly a whole bunch of FBI turn up at the place and are like, hey, Ian, you're under arrest for stealing the Declaration of Independence, which he still has on him at that point because he took it from Nicolas Cage. And then you just kind of see that, like, Nicolas Cage has come along on the raid to wave at him from the shadows. So we get our epilogue where we find out that, like, all three of the treasure hunters are famous now. The Gates family's name has been cleared because they're not kooks. They knew about the treasure all along. They're being invited to speak at all kinds of museum openings and academic events and press tours and stuff. And you find out that Riley is really mad about it because Ben turned down a 10% finder's fee on billions of dollars worth of treasure.
Settling for, and the punchline of the joke is that we have to settle for 1% finder's fee. And Nicolas Cage says, you know what? If we find another treasure that affects the entire world, you make the call.
Then in the second movie, he does not live up to that promise. I'm just going to say that right now. That is a point in the second movie that they never bring up, is that Ben negotiates again in a similar manner right in front of Riley. And Riley's like, hey. And I'm like, Riley, this would have been the point to be like, no. You said I could negotiate this time.
So yeah, they only settle for a 1% finder's fee, which Ben and Dr. Chase, who are now in a relationship, have a very exquisite house somewhere. We're never told where. This is probably still could be in Washington, could be in Philadelphia, could be in New York. We don't know. The movie never tells us. And with Riley's 1%, he gets a very expensive car.
Yeah, and I'm not buying that those two purchases are 1% of their finder's fee, are like a split 1% of their finder's fee even. Like, that would be, given how massive this treasure is supposed to be, they would have been way wealthier than that. Because Riley is complaining about, like, oh, they're sending a private jet for us to take us to this event. We could have had a whole fleet of private jets if you hadn't given all the money away. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but 1% of that treasure split even among three people equally is still going to be enough for Riley to buy himself a couple of private jets. Not just a Lambo.
Just 1% would have been enough that you never have to work another day in your life.
Not even that. Like, 1% of the treasure we are shown in that movie would honestly have made them the three richest people on the planet at that point.
But I do like how kind of like Ben is looking at Riley and it's like, yeah, I'm sorry about your struggles, as he looks at his very expensive vehicle.
Yeah, and as he drives away from Nicolas Cage's very expensive manor house on his estate. And that's where we end the movie.
And that's the end of the movie. That's National Treasure. Like you mentioned, there was a sequel, National Treasure, Book of Secrets, which came out a few years later. Just a few years ago, there was a National Treasure television series for Disney Plus, and there was talk of a third movie, but it never happened. I don't know if I would really want another movie, or even if the TV show had actually been a hit, if I wanted more of that. I don't know.
As far as I know, there is only one person in this movie that reprised their role.
And it wasn't Nicolas Cage.
It wasn't Nicolas Cage. Actually, no, there are two people. I had forgotten. There are two people from this movie that reprised their role in that Disney Plus TV series. Do you know who they are? Without looking. Can you guess? Make a guess. Who are the two people from this movie that show up in that TV series?
I would say Riley and Dr. Chase, and that would probably be for one episode.
You got one of them right. Riley shows up. I don't know how many episodes. The other one is a very brief appearance by Harvey Keitel as his FBI character. But apparently Riley is the only one that plays any significant role at all in that, and he shows up apparently. All I've read on it is it said he recurs in that, and then I saw that Harvey Keitel had basically a cameo in episode 1, and that's kind of all I really know about it.
Yeah. So on that, Kiki, does National Treasure have the magic?
I mean, again, it's one of those where I'm not saying it's a good movie, but it is a very entertaining and enjoyable movie. You will have a lot of fun watching this movie if you haven't seen it in a while, or even if you haven't seen it at all. It's just kind of a fun romp, and it's Nicolas Cage at one of his most understated at this point in his career, which is really bizarre for the movie where they steal the Declaration of Independence.
He's not quite in full Nicolas Cage. You know, we've seen him in other movies we've talked about this month where Nicolas Cage kind of goes full Nick Cage. John Turturro is able to kind of reel him back and enough to make to make the movie work.
Yeah, but I think the reason why Nicolas Cage was the perfect person to play Ben Gates is that you can kind of be like, yeah, if a guy that looked and sounded and generally acted like Nicolas Cage walked into the room, like without being like a massive movie star or anything, you know, if just like a guy with those attributes, a guy with that Nicolas Cage-iness to him walked into a room and was like, so I got a theory that there's like a treasure map on the back of the Declaration of Independence. Like, you would totally be like, yeah, that seems about right for this person. You know, like you could just buy him as that guy.
Yeah.
Like, if there's central casting for like strangely weird conspiracy theory freak that hasn't devolved into like shouting gibberish on street corners, Nicolas Cage would be like the perfect guy to play that role. And so I'm glad they got him.
Yeah. I'm going to say it does. Like, I'm going to agree with you. I think this movie does have the magic. It is a very entertaining movie. With the ridiculousness of it all notwithstanding, it tries to kind of make it work in some sort of reality. Like, and then, like you said, having this however many stories down pit and underneath the church that Ben Franklin invented 3D glasses and all that other stuff. It does kind of take you out of it, but the movie is entertaining nonetheless. We might get around to doing the second movie at some point. I wouldn't be against that, but I definitely would recommend this movie if as part of your 4th of July movie marathon, if you decide to have one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to watch something like Independence Day, this is not quite as entertaining as the bizarreness of Independence Day, but it's a good, like, follow-up to it if you're having, like, a weird movies to watch on July 4th kind of things with your hot dogs and hamburgers and fireworks and what have yous.
So on that, let's move on to next week. Kiki, we're going to summer camp next week. Not just any summer camp. We're going to Camp Rock.
Another first watch for me, yeah.
As well as I. So yeah, back to the world of the Disney Channel original movie and another Demi Lovato movie. I feel like we're developing a pattern between Demi Lovato movies and Nicolas Cage movies.
Yeah, we'll have to break that pattern at some point.
Yeah, so another Disney Channel original movie, another Demi Lovato movie, this being kind of the one that cemented her as a Disney kid. It was this movie that led her to be in Princess Protection Program, which we have talked about. So it's going to be an interesting watch. Much like other Disney Channel original movies we've talked about, this does seem to be a musical. So we have that to look forward to. So come back next week for Camp Rock, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.